Welcome back to my channel. Let's talk about books. This week I want to talk about Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. Now, when I started reading Brandon Sanderson, I actually started with Mistborn. I read about, 100, 200 pages of this, and I actually stopped and started reading Elantris. Now, let me tell you why I did that, because a lot of people think Mistborn is one of the best books of fantasy to be written in many years, and I can't disagree with them having finished it now. But because I was new to the Cosmere, I thought I needed to start at the beginning, and so I picked up Elantris and read that first, and then went back and finished Mistborn. In retrospect, I don't think that was necessary, and I would not recommend that. Elantris is a standalone book. You don't need to read anything to be familiar with this, nor do you need to read this to be familiar enough with the Cosmere to read Mistborn. In fact, I don't even know what the connection is yet. The basic premise of Elantris is that 10 years ago, the city of Elantris fell, and the people who lived there, the Elantrians, who were like gods and used magic, disappeared, and no one really knows what happened to them. It's a mystery, and it's a mystery that we're going to try to solve. Elantris follows three viewpoint characters, Raoden, Wraithen, and Serene. And Raoden is the Prince of Erelon. He comes down with an illness, essentially, and is removed from society and put into this city of Elantris, which is a city where 10 years prior there used to be gods, essentially. Wraithen is a high priest of one of the many religions that are tracked in Elantris, and it's one of the things Sanderson does well is picking one or two elements of society and really focusing in on that. And in Elantris, one of those was religion. There are multiple religions, and the way they interact together and the way that the characters interact with each other of different religions is important to the story. Finally, there's Princess Serene, who was the betrothed of Raoden, who moves from her home to marry Raoden, but by the time she gets there, he's gone. He is in Elantris and taken by this illness. And so Serene has to figure out her place in society and where she fits in with Wraithen, and as she tries to unfold the mystery of Elantris. It's told in those three viewpoints, and it alternates one after the other. And I found that Elantris was kind of a slow burn for me. The first 2/3 of the book were kind of slow. There's a lot of world building, and it was worth it in the end as things built up into the climax, and some ways that I did expect, some ways that I didn't. The first 2/3 of Elantris were a little bit slow as there was a lot of world building, but it did pay off in the end. The climax came, and I was blown away by what happened and how it played out. I think it's a great entry point for Sanderson, but you don't have to start here. You can come back to it. And it is something that Brandon has said that he's going to continue in the future in this world. And there is another story, The Emperor's Soul, which takes place in the same planet, the same fantasy world. I have not gotten there yet, but I will, because I think it's got a compelling backstory to it, and the magic system is a harder magic system, not super hard, not like a Mistborn, where the magic system is very, very fleshed out. But it is fleshed out enough that it's interesting, but plausible in its own way. And I liked seeing the character who is pursuing this magic system in their pursuit, and where it goes. A couple of criticisms I would have in Elantris would be the romantic element, which is not very fleshed out in my opinion, and kind of seems forced and almost an afterthought. I felt like individually their characters were fleshed out, but when they interacted with each other, most of the time those connections were not where I thought they should be. There's a few exceptions. The Wraithen and Serene relationship was interesting and went to an interesting place. I don't want to get into spoilers. I will say that a couple of these characters had good connections, and several of them did not. One thing I did like about Elantris was the villain situation, which did not end up where I thought it would. I think that although I liked the conclusion a lot, there were some parts of it that were just so fast. The Sanderson slow build is real. As it did build up, I think toward the end it got so fast it almost got to the point where I had to flip back and reread a section just to make sure that my mind didn't gloss over anything, because I will say that toward the end every word matters and he does not waste any space. He rips through this conclusion at a breakneck pace, and it was satisfying. One thing I really liked in Elantris was the relationship between Raiden and Galadon. I thought they had a very interesting relationship, and there's a friendship there that you don't often see in fiction. One of the characters I actually ended up liking more than I thought I would is Rathan. He does have a very cool arc, and I'll say that it was satisfying, and that's all. I thought that the Elantrians were really interesting and pretty well fleshed out. I think that if there is a sequel eventually, I would like to see more of what happens with them, and some of the magic that has been lost come back, because there are a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of places Sanderson could go for a sequel. I don't know that it's absolutely necessary to have one, but if he does one, I'm going to read it. Elantris also had a lot of political subterfuge, which if you're not into that, that's fine. There are other elements that make up for that if you're not into the political stuff. I will say that he does quite a good job of court intrigue and in keeping you guessing on what's going to happen. There are a couple of things that I imagine were going to happen, and they happened exactly as I imagined it. And I don't know if it was predictable in that sense, but there were some things I did not see coming, and I was grateful for that. Having already read Mistborn now, and thinking back on Elantris, if you are a person who has read Mistborn and liked it, you may want to try Elantris. It is his first book that was published, although he wrote many before this was published. And it does, compared to his other works, you can tell that it is an earlier work, but it is still very good. It's about 3 parts fantasy, 1 part mystery, and I'll say that it was a good time. Sometimes after reading a book like Elantris, I like to go back to a YA, something like Skyward, where I can whip through it really quick, keep myself reading, and after that, go back to something a little heavier. Elantris wasn't that heavy. It was a little bit slow in the beginning. It did end up going pretty fast at the end. Have you read Elantris? What do you think about it? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And let me know about any books I should read in the future, and I will be sure to add it to my list. I'll see you next time.